Evening, welcome to Laughing Monkey Music Show. Today about Alex Skolnick. How are you?
Okay, how about yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm glad I could finally have you on the show. Been a fan. I've
Yeah, we've been trying for a while. Hmm.
We have, but I've been a fan of you since I don't know. I mean, we're almost the same age. So ironically, I've been seeing you since you've been a young player in the early days of
Yeah,
Testament
yeah.
till now. And then I think the Roots tour was the last one I think saw of you guys in
Mhm.
my area. But it never ceases to amaze me how fast a player you still are.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
And then it carries over because I watch a lot of your jazz stuff online too. So it's obviously they hold hands musically. I don't think I'm already jumping into this. I don't think a lot of people realize how much jazz and metal are so much alike. I mean,
Yeah,
especially on when you made a switch and the world went, "What's going on?" I don't think people got it that there's a connection there.
yeah, I'm trying to change that perception, but I'm definitely not the only metal guitarist who's into jazz or
Right,
jazz guitarist that does metal. It's still not common, but there's a few of us. It took me a long time to get the jazz together to where I
right.
felt like I'm a professional jazz player, but I have been, and pretty much almost all my side work outside of Testament is you could call it jazz or jazz adjacent.
Well, it's really good. I mean, to me, and I've even grown to learn the most jazz influenced stuff I listened to when I was younger. And I'm still a huge fan of Frank Zappa. Was it Frank Zappa inspired stuff because I liked all the left and right turns and everything
Hmm.
else. And the more you do music, the more you appreciate it. I mean, Page from Helmet was the same way. The chording, the changes in jazz really influenced his writing.
Hmm.
Do you think when you start doing really getting into jazz and then coming back into Testament, did it change your writing a little bit coming into it, your songwriting?
I think it definitely opened up a lot more possibilities. Um, I when I used to write, if I happened to get inspired and come up with a riff, I would often get stuck, and
Mhm.
I would have to go away from the riff and jam on the riff and hope some new part came up or some transition into do that process sometimes, but it happens much faster because now I have all this experience and knowledge playing with virtuoso musicians and the things I've had to learn to reach that point. I see more shapes visually. I'm more aware of musical components that I wasn't aware of earlier. I mean, so I've got to be a professional improviser. So when I improvise, I can ideas and then listen back and decide if any of them are worth using. Whereas I used to get stuck. I think it
Well,
was a lot of it was drawing from a similar vocabulary. And when you get to the point that you can play songs by Pat Metheny and John Scofield and Wes Montgomery, there's so much more that you're aware of as far as musical concepts. And obviously you're not going to play a jazz the way you would a heavy metal lick, but borrow from your jazz ideas while you have a crunchy metal tone, and it really opens up a whole new way of thinking.
and it's funny because I mean it did add to you coming back into the band, it changed. But as a band, as a songwriter, you and Eric, you always remind me of like the Rolling Stones dual guitar. Like each guitar player played almost something different but similar, and how you played together. Like they could have been separate songs, but they played together, and your tones were so good that right out of the gate, you guys had very signature openings and songs and changes. So when you came back to the band and knowing what you had, it was nice to hear you retain that was a different layering to it, and which you're describing
Mhm.
now is, a lot of the textures, but you did have a distinct sound that you've kind of kept too, also that you've just kind of added to it, really, your arsenal now.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think when you put us together, Eric and I, we have a special
Oh
sound
yeah,
that's not going to be the same with any other two guitar players. And yeah, I think just now that we've done the resurrected version of Testament for a long time now, longer than the original band.
wow,
um yeah, we've really learned how to work with that, and how, respecting that sound and that foundation we have, but also freedom, the work I do outside of the band, and also the work Eric's done. Eric's got this whole black metal side. He's even respected in that community and has done black metal music, and it's something I wouldn't have thought of. I wouldn't have brought that to the band.
right.
But he's brought some of that, and I've brought ideas that maybe it doesn't sound like jazz, but it comes from being able to work with these more technical situations outside of the band.
Well, that's what makes you guys so great together, because even like when you were absent and he kind of did some of the lead end role, some of the guys, the band went like really heavy, so it doesn't surprise me he did more of the black metal. So you coming back adds just a different layer back to the band again, because your tone is always so upbeat. There was, even for being like the heaviest band ever, your guitar licks were always so like melodic
Hmm.
driven
Uh-huh.
that allowed Eric's riffs to be heavy. Like it really worked so good together to help you support each other.
Yeah.
But your tone and the happy riffs that always made it such a fun thing, because even as heavy as the band was, it always had a melody in there. And I don't even know
Hmm.
if even the fans at the time got that, how melodic you guys were. Like, Chuck had the roughest voice. I had him on not that long ago, but he's been talking about his solo album forever. But
Uh-huh.
with your melodies, it always was kind of catchy in a way. Like it was, you know, kind of under the wire on some level.
Yeah, I think we're at a place now where that's appreciated,
Oh
and
yeah,
we kind of bring a little bit of what everybody specializes in the grant. There's a new song that I've written for the band that um yeah, Eric actually didn't want to play around with it that much. He didn't want to change it very much. I mean, he just sort of added his
right.
uh, tone and rhythm style to it, but it really works, and it's not something he would have come up with. And then he's being the founder of the band, is writes a few more of the songs, and he
Yeah,
writes stuff that I wouldn't come up with. You could put him on stage with Emperor or Demu, or one of these
yeah,
Euro black metal groups. It would sound great. He would know what to do. I would not know what to do. At the same time, I think if you put him with some of the musicians that I play with, Percy Jones and
yeah.
Stu Hamm, Ron Jackson, he would be out of his league. But I think that's what's so great about the band at this point, is that you know, we have these whole lives outside the band that we're able, and these musical styles that sound very different from the band, but then we bring it to Testament, and it sounds like Testament, and it sounds
And
unique.
and the fact that everyone's adult and everyone appreciates and see each other's part and role in the band. And I really want more people to sit back and go back and listen to the albums again. Like listen to the guitar
Hmm.
play between you and Eric. It's like the teamwork between you guys and the songwriting is something really special that I don't think, people like the band, I mean, they really just listen to like the production and it was, and I'm gonna say also was really interesting with you guys. You always had a lot of bass in it, considering just two hot shot guitar players, I'm saying, and busting your stones. But you guys are really great guitar players. To be that much bass in a song was fantastic. So clearly you can tell there's no ego. It was always about the song.
Hmm. I mean, at the time we did our first record, I think it was the same year or within a year of And Justice for All, which is a
Mhm.
monumental metal album, bass
Oh yeah.
under the radar. And I also felt like with all the bass was sort of yeah, it was there, but it was sort of an afterthought. And
Yes.
I always like, I listen a lot of the classic records that I listened to, had the bass. The bass was an important part of it. I mean, people don't talk about it much, but John Paul Jones is just
Oh, yeah.
such an essential part of Led Zeppelin. I mean, picture a song like Ramble On without the bass, do, 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 do. The bass really helps make that song.
Right.
So, we did the song Souls of Black. Um,
Yeah.
I was keeping bass around at that time and actually jam sessions on the bass just because it takes you out of this comfort zone. And the song Souls of Black came from that. I wrote guitar, and normally it would just be presented as a guitar riff, but I liked it so much as a bass riff, and I suggested to the guys, why don't we keep the bass? You hardly ever hear the bass by itself. So
No.
now you can't imagine it any other way.
No, I can't. But I also grew up. One of my first big two artists was Elvis and the Beatles, and Paul McCartney, being a bass player.
Yeah,
If you really pay attention for people, obviously not you, but drove a lot. The bass drove a lot of those songs. So to me, bass is so important to songs
absolutely.
that sometimes you don't even realize how you don't even almost hear it because it's just there. It's the guideline. It's
Hmm.
the structure that allows everybody else, like in the engine, like the drums. I think the bass is kind of like a frame of a car to me, and then the drums is like the engine. And when those are running great together, it allows everybody else to kind of get creative, and do their thing. But you need those basics. So the fact that when you would let the bass would kind of take off and do other things, the band, you know, it was really kind of fun because you're right. At the time, nobody was doing that, you know. And bass had a separate sound of its own too that a lot of bands didn't. I can't think of anybody at the time that had it. But all the thrash bands actually all had different sounds. But as far as bass players, even the tone was even different in bass. I mean, everything really stood out as separate instruments in the band. Whereas I think production wise, a lot of artists, a lot of musicians were burying the bass, like you said, with like Metallica and stuff. So keeping that in there, it allowed it to be that way. One of the things I think I don't know if you're known for, I always hear is in the beginning of all your in Testament, even up to now, you always have a kind of a special beginning, whether it runs through the whole album, the whole song, or not. There's always kind of an interesting beginning. Is that conscious, or is that just how you guys write?
Oh, you have to start somewhere.
Well, you know what I'm saying. So not all songs have a special beginning. Like when you listen to a Testament song, I generally know it's got like a cool a cool intro that goes
Yeah.
into it.
Well, sometimes that was intentional, but then sometimes it was accidental. There were times where there would be a cool riff, but what do we do with it? It doesn't really
Okay.
work as a verse. It doesn't really work as a chorus.
But it's become a
Let's try
signature now
it.
for you. Now you know what I'm saying. It's not. I don't know anybody who does. Like I always know in a Testament album, it's gonna be a couple good songs right in the
Hmm.
beginning. It's got something special in it that was just there. That you wouldn't
Hmm.
expect. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the intros are an opportunity to get really creative. And since we're talking about the first album, I think the Legacy has some really interesting intros. The song, The Haunting,
oh yeah,
that's when it starts out with just guitar, and then the band comes in, and it's kind of it's orchestrated. That was one I brought in early on, and the other one, Apocalyptic City, that was something. I think we knew that would be an intro because I had that part,
right.
the clean guitar and melody, and yeah, it's just it's not, and at that point we weren't doing whole slow songs. We weren't doing
No, no, no,
any,
not at all. But I think it's important. I don't always go back into old albums, but it's important because there are two. They're re-releasing the two first albums, so it's kind of fun to talk about these right now. I don't always do
Mhm.
nostalgia, but
Yeah, absolutely.
talking about these, it totally fits in. And doing these interviews with a band that I've grown up and seen you guys a million times, I think it's always fun to even go back and be like, you know what, right before the interview, I'll listen to all the albums in a row, because it's kind of a fun, it's fresh. And going back and listening
Hmm.
to the first two, and a friend of mine was just talking to me saying how the Legacy and New Order are like some of the best thrash albums ever, And it's true, they really are groundbreaking. And the fact that you were like 18, 20 years old when those came out. That's some pretty crazy.
I was 18 on the Legacy,
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
19 on the New Order. Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty close. It doesn't. My point is, it's that's
I
impressive
was
as a guitar
working
player.
very hard on it. Yeah.
But
Yeah. I
I
mean,
don't.
well, it's kind of funny because I was part of the local music scene, and I'd been going to clubs really since I was a preteen. I had an older brother who played, and I used to really, I was just dreaming about playing these clubs. And that was like, oh, I really wanted to work hard because, I wanted to do well in front of, all my friends and other musicians that would come. So it was kind of
Yeah,
a lot of pressure. And I wasn't thinking as much about playing nationally, but once we had this opportunity to record, and it's it it was such an unusual type of music at that point. I mean, even
yeah,
though Metallica was sort of pushing their way into maybe not the mainstream, but they were clearly coming changing the dynamic of what was possible with very fast, loud music. When it came to the bands that followed Metallica, it definitely seemed like, it felt like we were going to be pretty limited. There was no interest in, um, you know, being commercial, quote
right.
unquote, or anything. And so when we got this record deal, it was an independent record label, and there were a lot of records coming out on obscure labels, especially in Europe that you would,
Yeah,
and it kind of felt like, okay, this, a, almost like, we're getting a chance to do like a glorified demo and record for maybe in a few years we'll, be able to do a real record. But, the next thing you know, we're touring and supporting groups like Anthrax and Overkill, and
yeah,
the next year Megadeth, and the interest in that music went up. So I think between the work I was putting in just to play the clubs,
right.
for the that was captured on the first album, but then the second album, we had done uh we'd already done a tour of Europe, we'd done a tour of North America. And when you just get so many shows under your belt, it really raises your level. And I was, practicing any moment I could when, um, in between the shows too.
Did it feel like, 'cause, like obviously Metallica came in and they had the hammer that broke the beginning part, but the first wave of the thrash bands, like Slayers, Megadeth, you guys, Overkill, a lot of the first bunches, you guys all sounded very different. Like you couldn't put on, Overkill and Testament and be like, oh, they sound the same, totally different sounding bands. You know what I'm saying? That first wave, everybody sounded so different, almost like pop
Hmm.
bands in the 80s. Like, Duran Duran and Cyndi Lauper, they sounded totally different. Like there was such a difference in that genre, which is to me why all my favorite bands still hold up because everyone was their own band. Did you feel that you kind of had your own sound at that point because you could hear who you were touring with? You know,
Hmm.
at that did you feel that like because you guys were creating your own sound that I don't think anybody really copied. Maybe later on, but
Yeah, I mean, I think each band was affected by, um, several things. I think the vocals were all different.
yes,
Chuck,
totally,
he certainly had some influence of Tom. I think he would admit that, and
oh yeah,
Hetfield,
oh
but
yeah,
not Joey. He
no,
didn't sing anything like Joey from Anthrax or Dave
mhm.
in Megadeth. Um, so all the vocals were pretty distinct, I think, and then the lead guitar styles were different. The riffs were probably the most common thing, but everybody, nobody could come up with the exact same tone.
Yes,
And
that's probably the two right there. The tone, everybody had a different tone, and it's kind of cool that way. you
And the
know.
tone was very hard to get at that time. I mean, to it's kind of yeah, there's a positive side and a negative side to it. I mean, on the negative side, it was much more difficult. You had to work much harder. Most of the amps were designed for 70s rock.
Yeah,
They sounded like the tone sounded like it would be good for Foghat or Leonard Skinner, right?
right.
And then fast forward a number of years, and that tone gets popular, and there's even multi-million selling albums that have this tone. Well, amp manufacturers had no choice but to
Right.
make amps that could sound crunchy. Yeah, now it's easy. Now you can go to any music shop, pick up a head and a cabinet and a good distortion pedal. Now and that as we speak in the 2020s, amp modelers have gotten really good. Now you have these
Yeah.
devices, but back then, yeah, the negative side was it was so difficult to get a sound. The positive side was that you were forced to be individual, and people
Yeah.
didn't sound the same. So now you have a lot more groups that sound very similar. And you could tell, oh, they're using this exact same plugin,
Right.
including some very I could
Yeah.
point to about a half a dozen very popular groups with, very that sell a lot of tickets and, maybe they don't, nobody sells a whole lot of albums these days, but they, a lot of streaming.
Right.
And it sounds so similar. And I can tell, oh, they used plug-in X or
Well,
whatever.
and you're very good because I want to say people that aren't aware. I mean, you're very good on tone and technology all the time. I mean, I've seen videos which I love. You were doing like amplitude. You're like the little plug-in modules early on. And
Uh-huh.
I played with those too on my guitars too. You have little amps, you plug it in your phone, and you're playing with the things. So you've always been playing with sounds. So you're very aware of where the
Yeah, I've
tone is.
always enjoyed
You're
those.
a little more hip than most people are as far as that.
Yeah, I've done demos for Amplitude. Um,
Which I think is
there
fun.
was
I
a
love that
Yeah, and I think when these phone apps first came out, the name escapes me, but around 2010 or so, there were these apps they were new that you could
one.
play through, and I did some demos at the NAMM show with them and stuff like that. But I think it helped having emerged during the time where you really had to be a scavenger and compile a bunch of mismatched gear and amps and pedals that really weren't designed to sound like that and somehow try to make it sound like that.
And I think special to me, like so to my group of friends, it was great because everyone could kind of at that time do a Zeppelin or a Black Sabbath riffs and something that sounds sort of like it, but no one could do thrash band riffs back then because every band had sound you couldn't copy it at that time. You could do the rock band, so it was even that much more special to us because you're like, oh, I don't know how they get that sound, you know?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to, yeah, I feel lucky to have emerged and entered the music world professionally before digital audio
Yeah.
workstations. And now I use those. I'm grateful for them. They
Right.
make the process so much easier. But before we had them, you had to know how to play a song before going in
Yeah.
the studio. You had to be rehearsed, and there was just something about that you had to work so much harder and be able to pull it off that I think the quality of a lot of the musicians at that time was higher,
Right.
with all due respect. And there's some great, amazing younger musicians that have no problem playing their instruments well and
But there's a
playing
difference in studio
sounding
though,
like the
you
records.
know?
But there are plenty that you can just tell, oh, yeah, they're so doctored in the studio that
Well,
it's not.
digital, right? I mean, that's the thing. I went to school for audio, so I mean, simple. There's a lot, I think there's a latency to us do the listening. But in the studio, I was recording, and you're not going into the studio back then. We were doing punch-ins. You need to know it if you're gonna be doing this messing up. The whole everyone's watching you. You're not gonna you're doing tape. That's just now it's digital, and they can even have somebody else come in and do it for you. Back then, the pressure was on you. You had to perform, just like in the studio. It's just as important on
Yeah,
stage.
yeah, even with
Sometimes
a
you have to
punch
perform.
in, even when you're
Punch-ins were
fixing a
nightmares with
mistake.
razor blades, and you got to do punch-ins. You needed to have it, or everyone's
Right.
gonna be on you.
Yeah,
Not like now.
editing was done with razor
Oh
blades
yeah,
and
incredible. But
yeah.
that and so as we celebrate these two new albums, we re-releases the two albums coming out. Were any changes done, or were they just like polished up so they sounded like brighter, or you punch things up? What kind of changes are done for the remastering on these two?
They were remastered and they sound a lot better. They just I think the early albums don't sound as good on streaming platforms, for example. Yeah, they're
Okay.
just not designed to be played on a streaming platform. It was totally different technology. Um, you know, this in fact the first record was done. It was the main format was vinyl. It was like
Yeah.
the sunset years of albums going straight to vinyl. And I think it came out on a CD. That was a big deal, but that was like a secondary thing. And then the second record, this it also came out on vinyl, but CD was competing with vinyl at
Right.
that time. But then just since then the formats have changed, and um, even for CD, it's still we were never really happy with the overall sound of the record.
I don't
And
think
I think
any metal bands ever got
well,
done
now that
right.
it's remastered,
Yeah.
it really works on digital platforms.
Okay. I think, and what people may not realize when albums were mastered and done at the time, like for vinyl, it was mastered for the sounds and the qualities and the levels were housed in vinyl. So when they did it on CD, and CDs were compressed, so they adjusted the sound for each things. And if it was a master done, it went out everywhere, and they're getting lazy. The format sounded crappy because it wasn't adjusted for how you were listening to it, what your stereo was, what your little speakers are. And I think something the remastering this is a lot better now for
That's true.
everybody. It's thought of in the big picture where
Well,
like
also, I think, well, they never remastered them again. I think, when they were remastered for CD, they weren't anticipating AirPods,
yep.
Apple Music, Spotify, all these updated,
What about
listening.
Is Atmos gonna kind of are they gonna do anything with Atmos with you guys in the future? That's
We
probably
haven't
for new
talked about.
stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think we have to see how it does, and see if it catches on. I know, I've listened to some albums on Atmos that sound
Yeah.
really good, especially like classical music, orchestral
Oh,
pieces
totally.
to remaster the old albums
No.
for it. It depends on if that catches on and if this is something that there's a demand for.
Yeah. To me, it's just interesting. You being such a proficient player, and Eric, the two of you guys would be great to hear you guys. If people aren't aware, like Atmos and Nutshell is really it allows you to hear sounds like all around you. It's very immersive, and there's what albums have been redone, and
Hmm.
then not too confused with Apple's Atmos, where they'll take an album and they do it this different way. They don't do the same like true Atmos. I'm talking you guys
Yeah,
like make it Atmos the way you guys design it in the studio, the sounds where you want them. That would be really interesting to hear an
it
immersive
would be
type of album.
interesting. I mean, I like how they create the effect of music coming from behind you,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you're really surrounded. But it hasn't come up, so we'll see if it does.
Just it's still nerd talk there for you. I just like the sound that a very proficient player. See,
Sure.
on tour, let's talk towards the end of this. I want to wrap it up for you. I know you guys got a big tour coming up. Um,
Several,
you,
yeah.
yeah, several. Wait, so it's actually Europe. You're getting ready to do in July, and then you're coming back
Yeah, we're
for.
doing summer festivals. We're doing a bunch of shows with Behemoth.
Mhm.
And then after the summer, we have a fall tour in the US with Creator and Possessed.
You guys doing, because the two albums coming out, are you putting more older songs back in the set?
Yes.
That could be fun.
Yeah, I think we're
You know,
doing yeah, we're gonna do like the full records. Most of the songs, maybe not all of them. But
that's
I
awesome.
think that's the plan. We may alternate between regular shows and full and the original records.
I think that's fun for a band because you can take a break from doing new stuff, and then once you do that, the fans have got it out of their system, and then the next tour, you get to do new stuff again as an artist. So you
It
kind
is
of
fun. Yeah, and it
make the
keeps
band
us
really
refreshed
fresh.
on the old songs if you ever want to put one of those back into the set. And the fans that have heard those sets seem to really enjoy them. We did that when we last time we were in Japan last fall,
Mhm.
and people went nuts. We played the this Metal Injection Festival out in LA and played those songs then, and people got all excited. They hadn't heard those songs in a
So
long time. You get to hear them, with really good live quality too. So that's a whole other experience.
and those are albums I hadn't heard. I mean, when I heard you guys, I think when I first started going out to see you guys in shows, it was like you guys and Megadeth
Mhm.
and Priest, and it's like an opera houses and stuff. It was the craziest shows. But you guys were supporting albums at the time, so it
Hmm.
was past those already. It's like around practice and such. Um, for me, that'd be a treat to see
Yep.
those again. And I love hearing the Anda's new stuff because you guys did, Roots and all the newer albums. Those are great to hear live too as a fan. Talk
Hmm.
about a new album coming up probably maybe the next year or so when you get past all the touring or the band.
Yeah, yeah, it's actually well on its way.
Oh wow,
Uh,
you
yeah,
guys
I
are
think it's
busy.
completely written. Drum tracks are done. We're still doing some rearrangements. But I was just out there with the guys, and we did some arrangements. Worked with Chuck on some vocals, and it's coming along well. I think. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it's got some different stuff, but it's
Yeah,
also recognizable.
is it probably next year coming out or end of this year? How far out do you
Yeah,
think it is?
I think late next year, later this year, maybe we'll, if we're ready, maybe have a single or so. But
Not
the
holding you to anything,
full
just kind of curious
come out sometime.
if around the holidays
I
or
hope so. Yeah, I
right,
hope so. I think it would be great to put out a something for the fans in the meantime, at least a single or two.
right. That's awesome. So the last question I want to talk about is solo stuff. I mean, if people aren't aware, you are a fantastic guitar player in your own trio and the bands you do. And I encourage you to go online and enjoy some of the the jazz music you have up and the stuff. It's a great stuff even on YouTube that people have shot or professionally done. It's just fun. You have a great
Mhm.
sound. You have a good tone. Even for jazz, I love. I love tone. So to me, it's always important. That's probably when you're one of my favorite guitar players because you have a solid tone. But
Uh,
new music you have coming up though too, right? You're a solo or more
yeah,
music.
so I have a recording that I'm mixing right now of new music for my trio that I'm very excited about. And
Nice.
yeah, it's mostly original music. And a few of the song titles are Prove You're Not a Robot, Guiding Ethos, um, Parallel Universe. There's a cover. I guess I could reveal the cover because we've done it live, but by Tom Petty, Breakdown, which
Oh,
I
nice.
think works really well. We changed it up quite a bit. Um, yeah, this I just think we've come a long way as musicians, and I think I mentioned earlier when I play outside of Testament, almost all I do is jazz or jazz adjacent.
Right.
So, um, it's not like this hobby of mine. It's real.
No, no, no. I
Uh,
don't think it's at all. I
I'm
mean, it's also like you stepped out of the band to be able to stand on your own to come back and be like, this is who I am. I mean, that's not
yeah,
what you do. To me, it felt like because you were so young when you were in a band, like 15 or 16, and you grew up with them. What else was there? You're a young man, and you kind of went out into the wild and
yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was
survived.
that
And then,
age,
yeah,
I hadn't yet developed or even discovered that side of my playing. It was only once I was in the band and I'd reached my late teens, early 20s, that I really discovered uh, my passion for jazz guitar and improvisation. And that was one of the deals when I came back to the band that, okay, it's not going to be like, that's not going to disappear. Like, that's
Yeah,
still who I am, which is a lot of the time. I mean, there's a lot of days in the year, there's a lot of hours in the day. So,
yeah.
yeah,
You
when
know,
you don't, there's a, when I'm not on stage or in the studio with Testament, yeah, I have one of my archtop elegant jazz guitars,
yeah.
and I'm working with musicians that aren't part of the metal scene at all, that are virtuoso jazz players, and that I think that defines who I am as much as the other thing.
I think so. I think it probably was strong. I actually, I would almost say that you leaving the band because when grunge and everything came, and then the band kind of changed and ebbed and flowed, and you kind of doing something fresh with another member out of the picture, allowed it to come back now so strong, with no explosions of like the bands get so bad where they just grind to a halt. Like you took a
Hmm.
break, a couple of guys left, whatever, other things happened, a couple stuck together, but then you know everyone kind of came back fresh with no real issues and had survived on their own, which allows
Yeah,
everything.
I think you couldn't have planned it.
Right.
Yeah, it was very accidental. But when we came back, we were wondering, is this going to work? Can this work? And then,
I think it's
as time
stronger.
went on, it became more clear. Yeah, I think it brings I know I bring something different to the band, and they kind of came into their own and with
Yeah.
certain sounds when I wasn't there, and we were able to just put that all together. And now some of the members are different. The bassist is Steve DiGiorgio, and now we've had several drummers over the years, but
Like
this
Spinal Tap.
very Spinal Tap like. But the kid we have, I can call him a kid, but he's in his mid 20s. Just as good as any
Oh
drummer
yeah.
we've had, which is saying a lot because the band has had some really
Oh
great
yeah.
ones,
Top
especially
notch
the
drummer.
last two. Yeah, with Lombardo and Hoagland. Anyway, he plays all their stuff, but he's got his own sound, and he's really like the age of
Little
like
drummer.
when music started. That this was the age, and he really captures that and brings this. People who hear him are just blown away. So I'm excited. We'll do this full tour with him coming up.
And he's in the perfect spot because he's getting a band that's already gone through everything, and
Hmm.
you've come back and you're
Yes.
strong and you've learned. So he can learn so much from you guys and still be a thrash band.
Yeah.
And but learn like the rights and the wrongs of the industries and really appreciate it without all the other garbage that you guys have already gone through, you know?
Yeah, I was just having this conversation yesterday. One of the drummers I play with
Yeah.
doing more jazz improvisation is his name's Kenny Grahowski, and he's one of the few that cross does both.
Cross
We
pollinate.
cross paths. Yeah, we meet up in the jazz world music
Yeah.
side of things. We meet up metal festivals because he plays for Imperial Triumphant. But yeah, and
Oh,
he was
I had him on.
saying that. Oh, so you know who he is. Yeah. And
Yep.
he was just so pleased with this situation with our young drummer because there used to be this system of apprenticeship,
Yeah.
especially in guys like Miles Davis, for example. He would bring in Tony Williams, who was this 19-year-old drummer, and Miles Davis had been around
Right.
decades at that point. And the apprentice system doesn't happen too much in rock and metal, but what's happening with our drummer Chris is very similar to that. And yeah, it's a band that's been around, been through their drama. He's not going to have to go through that. He's going to learn
Yeah.
from it, and he has. But he's also very mature for his age, so it just fits like a
I don't
book.
think you guys would take it a knucklehead either. So I'm saying, I mean, if you're a drummer coming in, if I was a drummer, I said, I'm such a metal drummer, you look at everyone who came before me and I'm in this band testament, it's quite a thing to take on and you want to do it right. Um, I do want to say as we give back your time, I want to thank you for giving me time today. Last comment.
Uh-huh.
Fantastic guitar player. I want people to check out Wes Montgomery. I love him. People Got to check him out. I mean, you mentioned him earlier, and I wanted to say it again. I can never say that loud enough to enough people. What a fantastic player,
Oh yeah.
right?
Oh, one
Oh,
of the greatest of all
yeah.
time.
And I mean, I have him on vinyl. So I have some great stuff. So I mean, I appreciate it, and I appreciate jazz. That's why I love a lot of stuff you do. Maybe not every metal fan that's
Yeah,
aware of
and
what you
also
do.
as you mature, as your ears mature, it gets better. Like
I think
Wes
so.
Montgomery sounds better and better. Now I still love Kiss, but when I was 10 years old, you couldn't convince me that Ace Frehley wasn't the greatest guitarist in the world. And I still love Ace, but as my ears have developed, I realized, okay, yeah,
Right.
he's great
There's
for
something
Kiss.
about Wes is
Yeah, but
playing on that fretboard that you can't touch. It's like alive. It jumps out at you in the record
yeah,
player or whatever. I'm not EJ myself, but you know what I'm saying. There's something about
somebody
how
like
clean it is.
Wes,
Oh
yeah,
my God.
as time goes on, it just gets better and better. And especially as a player that studies his playing and
Yep.
sometimes transcribes him. I just played a concert in New York the other day with a friend of mine, Ron Jackson. He's a seven
Yeah.
string jazz guitarist
Oh
and
wow.
very traditional upright bass and drums. And we did one of Wes's tunes, West Coast Blues. And
Oh nice.
um, that just I had that gave me an excuse to revisit it. I study that tune normally, but just
Yeah.
I'm constantly knocked out by the high level of Wes Montgomery's playing.
That is somebody who I got into, and I started playing guitar later in life, the past like 10, 15 years. And I'm not good by any means, but the more I played guitar, the more I started to appreciate jazz, on a different level. I think
Cool.
that's definitely a thing. Alex, I want to thank you for giving me some time today. I appreciate it. The
You're
updates, the band,
welcome.
and your solo stuff. Go. I think on your
Yeah, no
solo page,
problem, Sean.
solo page. Your Alex. I'll put the links there. Obviously, Testament, but
Yeah, it's
you,
all my socials are. I was luckily early reserving my name on the
yeah,
socials. So it's at Alex Skolnick
yeah.
on Instagram and X and Threads.
And you do have a nice website. It's just not up to date right this second. You know.
Yeah, and the website's alexskolnick.com. There's also alexskolnick.net that has my podcast
Yeah,
and
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you have a great podcast
that's,
too. We did talk about it, but it's awesome.
yeah.
I like the one you just did with
Oh, thank you.
From
Yeah,
the
Moods
Vine.
and Modes, it's called.
Yeah, it's a good one. But I'll put all the links up underneath it for everybody under YouTube and on the podcast platforms too, so you can click on it and
Very cool.
check them out.
Very cool.
All right, man. Thank you, and I hope I get to see you in October.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks,
Okay,
Sean.
take care. Bye bye.